Right. So there's one quick question for Mr. Ranade. So the famines and rivers, uh, in spite have bedeviled China for eons. Recently, food shortages in China are once again being talked about. So how bad is it on ground? So what is the situation for the Chinese regime in that regard?
There are three quick points that come to mind in response to your question. The first, of course, I think is well known that the Chinese are the world's biggest and, as they say, the best dam builders today. But apart from that, they have gotten seemingly on a spree to build dams without really assessing the ecological and environmental costs that they may have to pay. So, for example, on the Mekong River, they have built a series of dams in order to try and divert the water to irrigate their own lands without bothering about the lower riparian states despite their protests. But what has happened is that we are seeing huge floods in China thanks partially to those dams. Secondly, they have built large dams, like for example the Three Gorges, which is today under threat. So if anything happens to it, or even if they are compelled to release the overflow of water, there will be over 1 million people who will be directly impacted. Now, what environmentalists say is that if there is a 2% rise in temperature, then China will face serious problems in terms of water levels rising, in terms of floods, etc. The third linked factor to some extent are the food shortages. A lot of the food is being wasted or being ravaged because of flooding. But more importantly, after COVID, China is facing serious problems. So this year, in fact, they are going in for the largest purchase ever, largest import ever of soya beans from the United States. There is also a possibility that I am quoting the Chinese figures themselves, which have come out about a week or two ago, that they may have to import large quantities of grain from Canada and Australia. So China is in difficulty, though they are saying that they have got enough in stock for this year. But not if the stock was enough to last for about 2 years plus. So obviously there is a problem, but it's not desperate conditions yet for China. But this is something they have to remedy. They are caught between two compulsions, which is they have large areas of fertile ground in the north, but there is no water, which is why they are trying to divert the Brahmaputra to the north. They've already got, I think, 7 dams built on the Brahmaputra, that is the Yarlung Pangpo, plans to build 17 more. But what they're not decided about is whether to have one huge explosion on the Great Bend and then divert the Brahmaputra, or to build a series of dams and divert the Brahmaputra. That seems to be their problem. But in other words, what I'm saying is they are not really concerned about lower riparian rivers. They are looking at the immediate situation of food shortages to feed their people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have another question for Mr. Choi. The question is that given that China has consistently defied and flouted international laws and conventions, for instance, the UNCLOS over the SCS, what are the other options the world have uh, to make China comply in case of Hong Kong?
I think there is many creative ways, not only just going through this convention international venue, for example, United Nations. It seems to me that a lot of these organizations by the United Nations have been under very strong influence by China already. So I think people can, be creative about that. For example, like in Hong Kong, we have the Yellow Economic Circle, and the people making their life, everyday life, as a way to express themselves and to tell the Hong Kong government or Chinese government that we are not very happy about that. So at the same time, I think the world can also do the same thing. That, for example, we are supporting some freedom-loving countries, for example, India or Taiwan or other countries, that we should actually encourage our people to buy stuff from them, or encourage the companies to manufacture the products in these countries. And then one way to do it is actually probably we can be creative about that, like creating a label on that, saying that, oh, these products are actually made in freedom-loving countries, and so that the consumer can actually identify these products and to buy it before they can think about that, and then before they actually buy it, and so that it can have an impact on the not only just politically but actually economically. I think there's a lot of ways that we can do about it, and people can just be creative. Yeah.
Right. Right. There's one question for the Honorable Prime Minister. It's about demographic reconstruction done by the Chinese. It has targeted other regions as well, like Tibet, and recently we have heard that it is happening also in Balochistan, where there is a heavy Chinese investment. So would it be wrong to expect an organized and unified actions by these areas targeted by the CCP?
No, I think we should cooperate, whether it's Tibet with Uyghurs or others. Anyone that opposes China should all cooperate together to target, to push back against the CCP. As I said, the CCP, it's much more than just communism. It's a ultra-nationalist communist dictatorship which wants to, create this world where it's dominated by the Chinese people, by the Han Chinese, and that's why they're engaging in neo-colonialism, not just inside East Turkestan and Tibet, but outside of the occupied territories, into Africa as well. In Balochistan, I mean, they're setting up Gwadar port and building this so-called city in which they're going to bring about 500,000 Chinese exclusively for this area. At this present moment, it might not seem like a great threat. It's like, oh, it's only 500,000. But you have to look at the big picture. 70 years from now, they're going to largely alter the demographics to where those people, the original owners of the land, are going to be at a risk of becoming minorities in their own land.
I would actually, because of the time constraint, I'm now moving on to the last question. It's a two-part question actually, and the question is for everyone here, each one of the speakers. The question basically is for the layman. It is very confusing to see China's hostile behavior to these regions and also to other neighbors. So one is, what according to you is the reason behind this behavior, and secondly, what exactly can India and Indians do to help these regions, as we say, which are under the shadow of the dragon? So Mr. Ranade, will begin with you. What is the reason behind China's behavior, and what can India and Indian diaspora do about it?
Thank you. It's certainly not an easy question, but let me just say that as far as China's neighbors are concerned, including India, we have to be conscious that despite whatever China may say, its designs are something else. As I said earlier, that they are talking about the rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation, which means recovery of all territory. Now, this seems to be a bit of an anachronism, because here you have a Chinese communist regime which, correctly speaking, should have shed all past baggage, particularly imperial baggage that it inherited. But what they have done is, they talk communism, but they have clung on to all their imperialist past, in fact added on more to it. So whenever the Chinese empire was at its largest, That is the boundary they have selected, and they're pushing to recover that. As far as the neighbors are concerned, they have only two recourses. If I may say, there have been a number of people, including the United States, who have always held out that China, as it becomes richer, as it comes more into the, shall I say, circle of other countries in the world, it will also follow the same norms, same civilized norms, and become a responsible power in quotes. There were some who said that, who warned that China is not going to follow that path. The Chinese communist ambitions are quite different, and their goals are different. And I'm sorry to say that that has now come to pass. I was one of those also who was very wary about what the Chinese are going to do. And we are seeing today this. The only time that the Chinese have held back is when they have seen another force which can contest power with them. So I think the lesson for us is that whether it's diplomatic, whether it's economic, whether it's military, countries around will have to push back, and it's only then that China will behave. We have all seen the way that they ignored the Permanent Court of Arbitration as far as the South China Sea is concerned. We have all seen how they've ignored the various agreements and treaties that they have signed with us. So I think it is only these actions that will contain China's expansion.
Right, Tashi, if you can hear us, I would like to come to you.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, right. So, your take on why does the reasons behind China's behavior, and what can common Indians and India as a whole do for this?
Well, I think China has occupied so many countries till now, and when they occupied Tibet in 1950s with Tibetans failed uprising in 1959. Their main aim was to main aim is to really dismantle the Tibetan society, Tibetan culture, and establish their Han hegemony in in Tibet. So the reason that that they have occupied countries is to they want to appear appear a political giant in Asia, and their main aim is to really to establish themselves as a supremacist country which can rule other parts of Asia, and their main as we have seen how European countries have colonized so many countries in South Asia and many African countries. So it's the main reason is really to extract material wealth, and establish themselves as a giant country. Yeah. And the Tibetan what India can do is to really really especially for Tibet, to really back up the issue of Tibet in in every platform, and to as the House of Representatives in USA has introduced has passed a bill called the Tibet Policy Act bill, which rules out the interference of Chinese in of the China's in the reincarnation process. So, and also talks about the it gives talks about the religious freedom in Tibet. So what India can really do is to back up the issue of Tibet in and really really we have been making a lot of appeals to the Indian government and Indian leaders for many years now. So it's important to really back up the issue of Tibet in international platform and to in parliaments and stuff. Yeah.
Right, right. Moving on to you, Craig. Your inputs on that.
Um, I think there is a historical reason why China is behaving like this, because I think for the past 100 years, and China was seen as a victim of the colonization, and then after almost a century, then China suddenly becomes very strong and powerful in economic might. It seems to me that the nationalism and the national pride becomes very overwhelming amongst these Chinese people. And that's why I think that's also explain a little bit psychologically why they are being so aggressive. And talking about what other countries and what they can do and to help other freedom loving countries in Asia, I believe that there is a strong position in every country when they are forming this international treaty or international trade treaty with China. I think they can actually put in some human rights clauses in these treaties to at least ensure that human rights are conformed under the treaty. And apart from that, in the companies level, and inserting some human rights related, for example, labor rights or LGBT rights kind of clauses into these commercial deals with a Chinese company would also really definitely helping China or Chinese company to respect human rights and democracy or freedom. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Right. Thank you, Greg. I would like to move to Namrata as well. Namrata has been studying China for a very long time. She'd been studying it thoroughly, and from the Taiwan's point of view as well. So, Namrata, your input on this: what is the reason behind China's behavior, and what Indians can do about it?
Yeah. So I think what are the reasons? If you ask me, I think I'll take on from where Mr. Craig left. That of course there are historical reasons. The Chinese leaders have always talked about a century of humiliation that they faced, and that has also kind of given them a starting point as to also work on the Chinese nationalism. When they talk about all these things, and of course, as Mr. Ranade also pointed out in his opening speech, this whole China dream that especially, see, it's not a new thing. Of course, the way President Xi Jinping has laid it out, it is, of course, everybody's talking about it now, and the US also reacted after it, especially the China-US trade war that started. But this is not something new. If you also look at leaders like Mao and leaders after that, they have all spoken about it and they have all used it. But yes, this term, of course, especially after the book that came in 2010, China Dream, and how President Xi Jinping has used and quoted from that book time and again, that kind of, this timetable, as Ranade sir pointed out, that he has given 2021, 2035 made in China, 2049, that they will be a global power. This gives you an insight why we see that they're having these multiple disputes with other countries, how they are using especially all these targets and also nationalism to stir. We all feel that Chinese Communist Party is this monolithic organization, and they really have nothing because it's a one-party rule. They don't need any domestic. There are no domestic pressures, but there are domestic pressures, and nationalism always helps them achieve that. Now, the China dream is actually the dream of Chinese leaders. Not definitely, the Chinese people don't, see it that way. So they also have to use, certain things to stir this nationalism that is there. And, the reasons why it is, of course, at loggerheads with not only India, with Taiwan, South China Sea, East China Sea, all its neighbors, is achieving this, global this number one position that it wants. It either wants to surpass the US or at least be where the US is. So, I see that whatever China is doing is, due to all this, and we have today we've had discussions from Hong Kong, Tibet, and Xinjiang. I mean, especially I, on my own personal experience, I attended a conference in Taiwan. It was on security, and police officials from all over the world were there. I really don't know what I was doing in the conference, but I was there, and I asked a question about Uyghurs, and from the representative of UAE. And straightforward, like the one line that he told me was, "We don't sympathize with terrorists." Now, China has also used its economy, its 14 trillion economy, to today bury these, especially these issues that are there. How many people today talk about, were talking about Tibet, or they were talking about Xinjiang? So all this also, plays into that. I've met people from Hong Kong back in 2014 when I was, traveling across Taiwan. They told me that, there was 2 school teachers, and they told me that, a police complaint was filed against, especially all the women who were participating in that movement in their college, that they used their bodies to harm the policemen. So there are a lot of things that are happening, and what we see what is happening in Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang, and also to neighboring countries like us. Now, what countries like India or what democracies can do? See, ultimately, if you ask me, when it comes to Tibet, yes, India has done quite a bit to support Tibet initially, and I think we are still doing it. But when it comes to Hong Kong or Xinjiang, especially Hong Kong now, if you see, I think once the issue is taken up by countries like US, UK, and there are people in exile who kind of, when they're talking about, having this parliament in exile, if that comes up, and there is a lot of, countries like US and UK raise these issues at international platforms, I think India will definitely ultimately join the democracies in supporting these issues. And, when it comes to Xinjiang also, this whole, especially the 9/11 thing, the way, the Chinese have used that and, kind of built a platform, it is all the Chinese economic might. So, of course, countries all over the world, especially democracies, will do something about it. And, of course, they are doing about it. They have raised voices against it. A lot of countries have come out and made statements when it comes to Hong Kong and what is happening in Hong Kong. So, I think these things will pick up, and that's all I would say. Thank you.
Right, right. And moving on to you, Honorable Prime Minister, what are your thoughts on it? Because you had mentioned in an interview we did with you, Lokman did with you, about the people who began your movement. They had initially come to India, and they had chosen India as one of their partners. So what can India and Indians do now? And your reasons for the overall behavior of China. Over to you, sir.
As far as the overall behavior of China, I mean, this is definitely historical, like Craig mentioned, like Amrata mentioned, but it's also geopolitical. I mean, China, it calls itself Zhongguo, which means the Middle Kingdom. This is something that didn't start today. I mean, this goes back thousands of years. They've always felt like they have this supremacy. They used to be number one, so they have to get back to that number one position. They are the center of the world in their own perception. So in order to rebuild their status as the, quote, center of the world or the number one position, that means claiming other people's countries, taking over other people's nations, engaging in neo-colonialism, and at all costs. It's ultimately strategic because China wants, in order to maintain this position, to become number one, it's going to have to, take over other people's lands. because it needs the natural resources, it needs the mineral resources, it needs territory to settle its people, to feed its people. All of this requires, resources. And China doesn't have that internally within itself, so it invades and occupies East Turkestan. It invades and occupies Tibet. It's building up, islands and around the. I don't want to call it the South China Sea because it doesn't belong to China. I mean, it belongs to multiple nations, and I like to call it the Southeast Asia Sea. They want to control the global economy and take out any other competitor. And competitors in this realm are the United States, India, Japan, especially in the Asia Pacific, maybe even Australia. So China is going to want to push back against that. As far as what the Indian government or what India can do to push back against this, I actually, the Kutneti just published an article, an op-ed that I wrote called "Why India Should Support East Turkestan and Tibet," and in there I highlight, the reasons why India should support East Turkestan and Tibet, but I'll get back to the main point on how they can support. So one of the things that India can do is to formally, recognize East Turkestan and Tibet as being occupied by China, and call on other nations to do so as well. They can recognize, formally the East Turkestan government in exile and the Tibetan government in exile, and to help improve upon and build new democratic institutions here in our diaspora. They can help educate and train future democratic leaders of East Turkestan and Tibet. These are all stuff that can be done at the present moment, and also encourage other countries to do so as well. Because the hostility of China, it's going to increase daily. It's not something that's going to go away. As Namrata mentioned, and as Ranade mentioned, we have to push back against China. Only once you push back against them, they'll understand. They'll back down. If we don't push back against them and we accept everything, that they do, and we're like, okay, let's come to the negotiation table, we'll negotiate with you. They will never uphold any of their negotiations, any of their treaties. They promised autonomy for East Turkestan, they promised autonomy for Tibet. None of that has been fulfilled. They've made numerous treaties with India over, the territory, India over eastern Ladakh, and not, intrusion into India's territory. But China continues to do this again. Even with the Southeast Asia Sea, they promised, they're just going to grow peacefully and they're going to violate other people's territorial sovereignty. But you see this again and again. And at one point, if the world doesn't push back, China is going to become this very powerful monster to where it will be very difficult for us to resist at that point.